In this video, Darrell and I talk about how to choose the right stack for your startup. We go through the pros and cons of what we've used in the past and how we have applied them. And if you don't know who we are, Darrell and I were co-founders of a company called Realbase, which we recently sold for 180 million. I was CTO, Darrell was head of product. So there's a whole bunch of insights that we learned from that business, which we're applying to our new business, Clipflow. So let's jump in and have a look at the discussion. Yeah, so I guess the question is like, when we started this project, I always like to I like to use a project as a learning or an education piece. Now that goes against conventional wisdom, which says use the tool that you're really good at to get out an MVP. I've done that before, and I guess it adds a bit of, I don't know, I get a bit bored, I guess. Like if I know the tool and I just can smash it out and it's like, yeah, I'm not learning. I like to learn. Now, obviously it's not the best, but I feel like the learning doesn't slow me down too much. So with my 4x4, what we did is we tried the T3 stack. We learned I never built something on Next. I built a full application on Next. And you kind of learn when you do something like that, you get to learn the ins and outs of the whole thing. It's not just like, oh yeah, I built a to-do list. It felt good. I love this thing. Or no, until you get real down and dirty into a real big app, you don't know. So with Clipflow, we decided to roll with Rails as front to back to see if you got any gain or speed. Guess because I was, big fan of DHH. Really like the whole community around Rails, and they all talk about you got to go, HTML, ERB, build the views directly. Now it's fully server rendered, so you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's all just done by Rails. But for me, I really like components. I think that really, when that whole mentality switch came through, it really opened the doors to much better application.
Rails?
Well, no, not in Rails, actually from React. The React not invented, but they basically made the mainstream component style
and now
application.
that same way of building is in the Rails app.
Yeah, so Rails by itself doesn't have that. So we use Vue component, which was developed by GitHub. And it's a very similar concept. And recently I was building a whole bunch of that. And the problem with Vue component is it's hard to nest components and stuff. It doesn't feel that right. It has like sidecars and stuff. And it's a bit hard to work with. And then I found the Evil Martians, which I did a video on, released like a little, I guess their own, like it's called Evil Martians or Vue Component Contrib, which is just a way of making Vue components, which they've thought about. And they're a Rails shop or like a dev shop. So they build lots of apps. And
So
they've
it's
kind
just
of come
like
up with the best
pattern, basically.
Yeah, it's a pattern. And it's very easy to nest components, and they've thought of a whole bunch of things. It just makes it feels way more like React now. So now I'm building components that are nested and they all live together. It just feels exactly like React, but you're using Ruby and HTML, ERB. You got your stimulus components, and it feels great. Like, to be honest, I don't know how it scales realistically. I don't know what it is like to server render all these things.
Do you mean scale with users or scale with team?
Yeah, scale with volume, users, requests, etc. I'm yet to see. I think we just have to be careful with database calls, like anything, like the same with the APIs we used to build. The overhead and complexity has been reduced. You do not have to now go and create, and I saw this when I did my video on Next.js and Rails. You don't have to context switch the whole time. You have to go, I have to go to the API now to add this field so that I can have access to it on my front end. Okay, I added that on the API. Now I can jump back in here. Now I have access. Whereas with Vue components or Rails like this, if I have a model there, I have access to the whole model. I can chain things. It's much more flexible like that and fast. It's very quick. So in that, like, development velocity is higher, I think, when you're not juggling front and back. You don't have to deploy two things. With Next, you'd have to deploy your Next front end, and then you have like cause problems and stuff with your Rails API. So you're running two different deploys. You have things that get out of sync because if your API hasn't been deployed and your front end has, it could be for a minute or two, but it's still out of sync. You have all these things with when you're deploying one app to fly, you just send it, and away you go. So there's pros and cons. Like, I'm definitely going to say, like, you're going to find devs for React much easier than you will for Rails. But with Rails, you can have
that's
fewer
what I was
people.
going to ask. I was going to say if you were building Real Hub from day one now, knowing that you'd have to hire people, do you still think it'd be like the best choice? And maybe also, if you didn't, like, if you were never going to hire anyone, would you choose it?
Yeah, so there's two different paths there. So RealHub is a different beast in the sense that it had very high like the complexity in components was like high. So Artwork Builder, very
Yeah,
complex product, a lot of interactions, a lot of things that needed to work. I think you could do it in this way. You probably could,
but you're
and
like
you
pushing
may
shit
or may
uphill.
not. I don't know. I don't know. Like you may or may not have a lot of problems. You may actually have experienced things. Some things may have been simpler. Like with the nested context that we had to have and stuff like that was really difficult to do in
Yeah,
there. But like I've built some complex things, like the video review already in here is quite complex and it has multi-nesting, like nested components that talk back up to a main one. So it's the way of thinking. I think that's what's changed, is the way you think more like React way of thinking. But
yeah,
look, I would still stand, like if I was building RealHub, I would probably build it in React.
yeah,
Like just the way, like a lot of pages could have been built like this, like it is now. Like,
yeah,
but when I was building then, I didn't have access to these tools that I have now.
yeah,
So I would
exactly.
still,
Yeah,
yeah. So I still would have. I would, like if I was building it today, that would be a hard decision, right? Because
yeah,
like I know what that turned out to be, and like yeah, that's a tough call. I do think you can get a lot of work done with very few people in Rails.
yeah,
So, and then the overhead complexity, like what is the cost of having to do front end? Then you have to set up your API call in your Redux controller, then or your Redux store, then doing your API endpoint. Then, like, what is the cost of that? I don't know. I think it would be
yeah. And I
high.
imagine that cost is very different for anyone else, right? Compared to you, if you doing it for you, you know that you can do all of these different things. So you could maybe get away with it, but other people, it might be better just to be a one man to do it with Rails.
Yeah, look, that's what I guess is like. I think you would save a lot of time if you just did it in purely in Rails. As long as you are performance, you're looking at your performance the whole time, and you're making sure
Yeah,
you are writing performant code, and you're not doing stupid database calls and like n+1 queries and all that stuff, because that stuff all matters, right? And you can do those mistakes in the API or without. Because I don't think Ruby, especially now with compute power being so high, I don't think Ruby is that much of an issue. Like if you're getting if you're getting that's, you know, 50 milliseconds slower than if you were using something else, or 100
yeah,
milliseconds, like in the grand scheme, it's not that big of a deal.
yeah,
So, because yeah, with React, we were making heaps of queries, and you have lots of page shift, like things loading screens and which you can all do in Rails now with Turbo. Like you can have screens that load at different times asynchronously, and you can flip out pieces of stuff. So it, like this app now feels like a React app, but it's all running server rendered.
yeah,
And like you can preload a link so that before you even click on it, it's loaded the page. So when you click, it feels like it was instant. So there's
yeah,
a lot of little hacks now that you can do to make it feel like a React app, but you're all server rendered. It's a lot easier to reason with like actual data as well. Like that what comes back is exact. You don't have these out of sync problems where your API
yeah,
data, or you have too much data. Like we had that all the time. Like we had to filter data out. So you'd fetch data, then filter data, and like you have all these hooks, and it's just a whole bunch of extra complexity.
yeah,
So maybe it takes longer for someone to come in. Like, it's easier to teach someone how to write Rails or Ruby. It's a very simple language. So
yeah,
you can't actually make a call on this until you actually get to the same scale.
yeah,
Like if we get to that same scale, you can say, okay, yeah, this is easier or this is worse, or everything's going to have its own problems. But
yeah,
GitHub was running just pure Rails for a very long time, and
yeah,
they'll have more users than we'll ever have. Like,
yeah. Yeah,
so
so performance probably not a big problem.
yeah, I think you can always get around it, and you can cache things. Like you can be smart with how you cache pages, and there's hundreds of different ways. But I've seen like the pro versus building something like on Next or serverless. I think there's bigger pros here. it depends, because like if you are building a React app now, you are building it on Next. No, I don't think anyone else is really doing a vanilla React app. They're always building on Next, which then comes with serverless. Then you have like all these weird things with like, even just doing a job, you have to use another
Yeah.
third party service. Everything just becomes much harder. And Rails is bringing all these things like in house. Like you get the new what's it called, solid queue. So like
Yeah.
even you now
What's
run
that?
your queue inside of your app. You don't have to. It's all run in the database. It's not run. You don't have to use Redis for your queuing. So when you're
Oh,
starting as a startup and you're still trying to find product market fit, you want to be able to iterate fast and not worry about infrastructure.
yep.
Because you want to be able to launch one app, just roll it out, and not have to worry about, okay, I have to manage my Redis server here, and I have to get my workers and because just it costs more money to run, and you don't
Yep.
even know if you have going to get any users. So
Yep.
Rails out of the box now just offers you everything you could ever want. It's been battle tested by everyone, and it works, and it's stable. Like one of the arguments even for Rails, using Rails over anything like Next, is it's been stable for so long. All the GPTs know the docs. They
Yep.
haven't changed. Whereas Next
Yep.
changes every year, they become invalid. And then you're
Yeah, they
getting,
break everything with a new update. Yep.
yep. And then you're like, it doesn't work. And it's like, yeah, it never worked. Or it worked
Yeah.
2 years ago, but because they're not up to date. So I think that's where we get a lot of power. Like, yeah, you just grab a gem or, write your own auth. It's got all that stuff here. It's very simple to do. And there's, battle tested things. So far, so
Speaking
good.
of GPTs, have you tried Cursor yet?
Cursor AI, no, I haven't installed it yet. No.
Uh,
Have you?
Are you saving that one for a video? No, I downloaded it, but I haven't opened it yet. I
Oh,
don't
it's just,
think it'll have much to learn from my 6-page Astra
well,
website, to
what'll
be
be
honest.
interesting is if you got Clipflow repo and you chucked it in, and then see if you can add stuff to it. That's
Like
where you'll
try and
see.
actually build a feature into
Yeah.
Clipflow with it.
hmm hmm
Maybe I'll
That'll be
record
interesting.
doing that.
Yeah. So Cursor AI, yeah, it's one of the new tools. I haven't tried it personally just yet, just because it's a tool. So I don't want to spend half a day configuring a tool. It could speed me up. It's possible. Uh, yeah, I'm still on the fence on the whole autocomplete thing. I
Yeah.
just
I
I
mean,
feel
I
like,
think for an experienced dev, it's like there's a trade off. For me, there is zero trade off. It's either get no code done or get some code done
well, it's
most of the
leveling
time.
up. I think that's why, like, it's
Yeah.
probably good for juniors as long as the juniors understand. But Primogen made a good comment. Like, if something just gives you the answer, you don't learn. You never learn. You
Yeah, I
need,
saw an interesting one about tutorials and why tutorials are broken for that same reason. Because you watch a video coding tutorial and they fix everything in the back end. Like they fix everything before they make the full tutorial, or they do it off camera generally. So if
yeah,
you follow a tutorial and something breaks, you don't know how to do it. And some people address it. They're like, if you see this error, this is your likely problem. But most tutorials just go like, here's the perfect path through. And you
yeah,
never encounter anything that they encountered because Node upgraded a version and this happened.
yeah. So I guess that's a pro versus the live coding where you actually make
Yeah.
the mistake and fix it on the fly. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess that's a perfect thing. But yeah, if you just get spoon fed, you never feel the pain, and you doesn't go into your brain. Like any
Yeah.
problem that I've ever had that's like was super painful and took me ages to figure out, it's cooked into my brain. I will not forget it. Like I
Yeah.
struggled the other day. I was trying to do, and this is one of these things, right? Like you struggle and you battle the front end and the JavaScript world, and you was trying to get Tailwind to change out a icon of the little, I think it's what we do use, a crown in when you're writing, you have, or in the packaging, yeah, the little star of your
Yep.
title that you've selected. I was battling there by using the sort index, and I was getting JavaScript updated and show a little star, and it was just an absolute pain because of the way you have to use data attributes from a parent down to a child. And yeah, but I remember how to fix it now. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, I chucked that idea in the bin and just went straight to Turbo, and it just works like a freaking charm. And that's one of the things. And like the
You
simplicity of
learned for
using
nothing.
Rails is so much easier than trying to. Honestly, I spent 2 hours, and like I only have a 4 hour like a block,
Yeah.
and I wasted half the time battling. And then I just at the end just said, stuff it, do a Turbo stream, and just flip them all out, and it works like way better.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just one of those things. One, I do think with Rails and Turbo and Stimulus and the whole Hotwire ecosystem, the tutorials are really poor. There isn't
Yeah,
enough
because it's new,
documentation.
right?
Well, it's newish, but it's just I just don't think they've really. There's so many things that people are working on that just, and also because it's not like the flavor of the month. There's not heaps of people talking about it. So I think
Yeah, I think
if there's
I
better
mean
documentation,
you've seen with your videos when you mention Next versus mentioning Rails the difference. Anyone else who's thinking of making tutorials probably made one turbo tutorial and went, "Oh, that went shit. I'm not going to make that again."
correct. Yeah. So yeah, I do think like with time, like there seems to be like a renaissance or whatever resurgence of Rails, like people getting not just Rails but Laravel, Rails, all those guys doing the frameworks that have been good for this many years. People kind of starting going like, well, maybe we should use something like this. So
Yeah,
I think it's something to experiment with. Don't just go with the flavor of the month. Yes, if you're looking for a job and stuff, you do need to know those things because that's how you're going to get a job. But if you do want to build yourself a business, find tools that actually help you work really quickly. Because like, look what we can do with very few resources. We can build a lot of stuff very fast. You don't have to worry about thinking about things because they've already been solved. You don't have to be like, what database adapter should I use? Should I use
yeah,
Prisma or should I use Drizzle or should I use, it's like there's
yeah.
too many options.
But like in the context of a new person trying to learn, if they could learn with a language that let them progress faster to bigger, more ambitious projects, like you can go back to Next and figure Next out if you built a
Mhm.
really good app with Rails. So yeah, you don't necessarily want to learn Rails if you're looking for an immediate job, but you could probably learn more if you can progress faster as one person building an actual app as opposed to the to-do list.
Yeah, in the end of the day, like where this world's going is you're probably going to find the completions, the auto completions are going to get better and better where you don't really need to know the framework so much, but you do need to understand business logic and how
Yeah,
customers function and work and what they want. So it's going to
yeah,
become more about that, less about the language you choose so much, and
yeah.
just using something that works. And in the end of the day, they all work. There's like I saw a funny meme just showing like a Olympic sprint race, and it just labeled all the different frameworks, and like we're talking milliseconds differences. And it's like in the end of the day, they
None
all can
different.
do what you they all do what you
Yeah,
want, but
yeah. The funny thing is, like, processing time and cost is nothing compared to staff time, right? Like
correct.
paying for staff to do stuff, the faster they can do it, you could save much more than really inefficient processes in the back end just by making 3 developers faster for a year.
Yeah, say Ruby's half the speed of whatever framework you want, which it's not. But even at that argument, you pay double for the server time. So instead of 20 grand, you're spending 40 grand a year. But
Yeah.
how much time are you
And
saving?
like one developer can make 15 features versus 2 or 3, and then like you get more customers and then you have more money for servers. So who cares?
Exactly. It's one of those things. And then you're getting this every year, the performance of the chips from the last year are doubled So yeah, it's like this game. That's why solid queue now exists because databases used to be too slow. We need to use in memory. Now
Yeah.
databases run on like NVM SSDs, and it's like it's the same. It is almost memory. So why are we
Yeah.
even
And they're
bothering?
fast as. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, now I can just achieve the same thing but with less complexity. So let me just use that. They're
Yeah.
even doing solid cache, which is going to be caching in the database, which is used to all be
Oh,
in memory. In memory.
that's
So yeah,
cool.
it's all part of new Rails 8 coming out. So this is what I
Yeah.
mean. Like Rails is not dead. It's constantly moving. It's bringing out these tools that you're not getting that. Like you're relying on Vercel to do caching for you. You're not running
Yeah.
that yourself. Like you're relying on a third party or an entity to do that. So you don't actually control any of it, and you
Yeah, I
can't
mean,
really.
I don't know any of that stuff that's going on. When I deployed my site to Vercel, I just clicked a button and it did
Yeah,
everything.
and that's a pro. But to be honest, Fly.io is exactly the same. With Rails,
Yeah,
you get your little Docker file, and Rails is coming with like built-in Docker files now. You literally just go like fly deploy,
yeah,
and you're up. And like I love it. It's so good. It's so easy. It's so much easier than what I used to have to do. And the build, I don't know, like, I mean, at the moment, I'm just deploying from a machine. Eventually, we move it into a build pipeline, but like the simplicity is just fly deploy every day. Boom, gone. Takes 2
Yeah.
minutes, and you're up and running. So it's the same. It's the same experience.